until the Apache woman offered her daughter as my forbidden. He had never thought a simple visit could change everything in his life. The man, who had always considered himself careful and respectful, was only planning to spend a few days near the Apache community. It was a remote area, quiet, with endless stretches of desert and hills that rolled gently into the horizon. Brr. The sun was harsh, casting long shadows over the dusty paths, but it was a beauty that calmed him in ways cities never could.
He had grown up in the city, surrounded by constant noise and hurried faces.
Bury. Here the air itself seemed to slow time, urging him to think, observe, and simply be present. The first days passed with a routine that was almost meditative. He helped with small tasks in the community, repairing fences, carrying water, and assisting elders with their daily routines. The people he met were polite, but reserved. There was a quiet strength in their interactions, a sense of history that seemed to flow in every gesture and word. He listened more than he spoke, careful not to impose himself, and tried to understand the rhythms of their lives. It was during one of these days, while helping gather supplies from a small market area near the community center, that he first noticed her. The woman was standing near a group of children, her movements calm but purposeful. There was a light in her eyes that immediately caught his attention, a mixture of warmth and quiet determination. She noticed him looking and gave a polite nod, the kind that acknowledged his presence without inviting a conversation. He nodded back, feeling an inexplicable connection that made him pay more attention than usual. Over the next few days, their paths crossed several times. He began to understand that she was a mother, known and respected in the community for her knowledge and her way of guiding the children. Whenever they spoke, it was brief, but there was always a weight to her words. She spoke about simple things at first: the care of plants, the importance of water conservation, and the lessons of the elders. But he could feel that beneath those ordinary topics, there was a deeper awareness, a perspective shaped by years of experience and responsibility. The man thought he understood his boundaries. He had always prided himself on knowing what was right and what was beyond acceptable limits. Yet when she invited him to visit her home to see her family's efforts in cultivating a small garden, he felt a flutter of uncertainty. Visiting was normal in this community, a sign of trust and respect. He accepted, thinking it would be another learning opportunity. The house was modest but well kept, with signs of care in every corner. The garden was flourishing, with vegetables and herbs growing in neat rows. Her children ran around laughing and chasing each other under the sun. The man watched them, feeling a mix of admiration and a subtle sense of unease he could not explain. He had spent time around children before, but there was something in the way these children interacted with their mother and with the world that felt different. Innocent, yet deeply aware, free yet bound by a strong sense of belonging. Then came the moment that changed everything. She spoke directly to him, her tone calm but firm.
"There is something important I must discuss with you," she said.
He nodded, expecting a conversation about responsibilities, community projects, or perhaps guidance about local customs. But the words she spoke next left him momentarily frozen. She offered her daughter to him, not in playful jest, not in an abstract way, but as a real proposition rooted in her understanding of culture, tradition, and obligation. He blinked, unsure he had heard correctly. His mind raced.
How could this be happening? He had prepared himself for misunderstandings about customs or requests for help, but nothing had prepared him for this.
The daughter, a young girl with curious eyes, looked at him quietly. There was no fear, no expectation, just a calm observation that made his confusion deepen. He wanted to speak, to refuse, to assert his limits, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. He excused himself, stepping outside into the bright sunlight. The warmth felt almost suffocating now, pressing down on him as he tried to make sense of the offer. He walked among the garden rows, brushing his hands along the leaves and flowers as if that simple contact with nature could steady his thoughts. Inspiration. He had grown up in a world of rules and structure, where actions and consequences were clear. Here, he realized, the rules were more complicated. Morality and tradition were interwoven, creating a tapestry that he had yet to understand. He reflected on his upbringing, his values, and the life he had lived up until this point.
Every lesson he had learned seemed suddenly insufficient. How could he navigate a situation that tested both his principles and his respect for another culture?
Refusal seemed natural, almost instinctive, yet he felt a strange weight of responsibility, not for himself, but for the young girl and for the woman who had placed such trust in him. Over the following days, he tried to distance himself from the family, focusing on work and keeping interactions polite but minimal. But the offer lingered in his mind like a shadow he could not shake. Every smile from the mother, every glance from the daughter reminded him that this was not something he could ignore. It was not about desire or curiosity or even obligation in the conventional sense. It was about navigating a complex moral landscape where one wrong step could hurt others deeply. One afternoon, he decided to seek counsel from another elder in the community, someone known for wisdom and fairness. The elder listened carefully as he described the situation, nodding slowly but saying little at first. When finally he spoke, his words were measured. "Sometimes the world places us in situations we are not ready for," he said. "It is not always about what we want, but about understanding the consequences of our choices. You must consider the lives around you, not only your own." The man left that conversation with more questions than answers. He understood that there were no simple solutions, no clear path that would satisfy all concerns. Every choice carried risk, and every hesitation could be misunderstood. Yet, amid the confusion, he also felt a growing sense of empathy. He began to see the woman not as someone making a shocking request, but as someone acting out of care, tradition, and perhaps hope. He also saw the daughter as a human being, not an object of expectation, someone whose life and feelings mattered profoundly. The tension built quietly, almost imperceptibly over the next week. Each interaction with the family, each moment spent observing their daily life, reminded him of the stakes. He was learning patience, restraint, and the art of careful listening. He realized that understanding could not come from immediate decisions or reactions. It had to grow from observation, reflection, and sincere effort to see the world through another lens. By the end of the week, he found himself at a crossroads. The sun set slowly over the hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. He stood alone in the quiet, listening to the faint laughter of children in the distance. He knew that the moment of decision would come soon. Whether he chose to refuse outright, to engage carefully, or to seek a solution that respected all parties, his actions would matter. They would shape relationships, influence lives, and leave a mark that could not be undone. For the first time in a long while, he understood the true weight of responsibility. It was not about power, choice, or preference. It was about conscience, respect, and humanity. The offer that had initially seemed shocking was now a mirror, reflecting his own values, fears, and understanding of what it meant to act with integrity. He took a deep breath, feeling the dry desert air fill his lungs. The path ahead was unclear, but he knew he could not avoid it forever. His mind was still full of questions, his heart still heavy with uncertainty, yet there was a quiet resolve forming. He would face the challenge, whatever it demanded, with honesty and respect. He would listen, observe, and act with care, understanding that the lives of others were intertwined with his choices. As night fell, the stars began to pierce the dark sky, distant and unwavering. He thought of the mother, the daughter, and the quiet community that had welcomed him. He knew that the days ahead would test him in ways he had never imagined. And yet there was a strange calm in that realization, a sense that he was beginning a journey not only through another culture, but through his own heart and conscience. The first part of his story, he realized, was not about refusal, not about acceptance, but about awakening. It was about learning to navigate a world that did not fit neatly into rules or expectations. It was about understanding that respect, empathy, and patience were as vital as courage and conviction. And as he prepared himself for the difficult conversations to come, he knew that his life and the lives of those around him would never be the same again. He woke the next morning with a heavy mind. Sleep had brought no clarity. Only fragments of conversations, glimpses of the woman's calm gaze, and the quiet eyes of the young girl. The memory of the offer weighed on him like a stone in his chest, pressing him to think, reflect, and question everything he had believed about his limits and responsibilities. He dressed slowly, moving almost robotically, as though each task would anchor him to the familiar world around him. As he stepped outside, the desert sun was already high, scattering golden light across the hills.
The community was beginning its day, children laughing, elders speaking in low, steady voices, and women preparing food while humming soft songs. Life went on as if nothing had happened, ordinary and yet profound in its rhythm.
He walked slowly, observing the patterns, trying to find a thread of understanding that could untangle the knot of his thoughts. Over the following days, he made deliberate attempts to interact less with the woman and her family. He helped with chores, repaired fences, and assisted wherever he could, but he kept his conversations polite, short, and neutral. Yet every interaction, no matter how simple, reminded him of the offer. The daughter's quiet glances, the mother's polite smiles, even the way the children played near him, all of it seemed charged with meaning, making his attempt at distance almost impossible. Desperate. One afternoon, while helping carry water from a nearby stream, he decided to speak with another elder in the community. This elder was known for wisdom, calm judgment, and a deep understanding of human nature.
He hoped that through this conversation he might find guidance on how to navigate the complex situation. Sitting in the shade of a broad tree, he explained the offer, the confusion he felt, and the fear of doing something wrong.
The elder listened silently, his eyes thoughtful and steady. When the man finished, he spoke with careful words.
You must understand that every culture has its own ways of expressing trust and responsibility.
Sometimes what seems shocking to one may be natural to another, but the key is to protect those who are vulnerable, while respecting the traditions you do not yet fully understand. The man nodded, absorbing the advice.
It was helpful, but it also complicated things further.
He realized that refusing outright might be seen as disrespectful, but agreeing blindly was impossible. It would go against everything he believed in, every moral line he had drawn for himself. The words of the elder stayed with him. Protect the vulnerable, respect the traditions, and act with honesty. How could he balance all three when they seemed to demand opposite actions? Days passed, each one heavier than the last. The man began paying closer attention to the woman and her family, trying to understand their motivations, routines, and emotions. He noticed how carefully she treated her daughter, guiding her gently, allowing her freedom while teaching her lessons about respect, responsibility, and life. He saw how the children interacted, how laughter and discipline were balanced, and how community values shaped their daily lives. One evening, the woman invited him to join her for tea, a small ceremony she conducted at the end of each day. He accepted, unsure whether it was a gesture of friendship, a subtle reminder of the offer, or simply hospitality. They sat quietly together, the air filled with the scent of herbs and the fading warmth of the sun. She spoke softly, not pressing him for answers, but sharing stories of her own childhood, the lessons she had learned from her mother, and the hopes she had for her children. Through her stories, he began to see her not as someone making a shocking request, but as a mother, as a human being navigating her own fears, hopes, and responsibilities. She spoke of choices, of sacrifice, and of the weight of raising a child in a world that could be unforgiving. The man listened, absorbing each word, realizing that understanding her perspective was essential to any decision he would make. He also began noticing the daughter more closely. She was quiet, thoughtful, and observant, never imposing herself, but always present. There was a kindness in her eyes, a curiosity about the world, and a gentle intelligence that reminded him that she was not a symbol or a possession but a human being with her own thoughts and feelings. Every glance, every small gesture made him more aware of the responsibility that the mother's offer implied, and the seriousness with which he needed to approach it. Despite the calm moments, tension simmered beneath the surface. He found himself questioning his own reactions. Was he afraid of cultural differences? Was he simply uncomfortable with responsibility? Or was he truly recognizing the potential consequences of his actions? Each reflection led to more questions, and every question made his sense of duty heavier. One afternoon, as he helped prepare a communal meal, he overheard a conversation between other members of the community. They spoke of the mother and her family, of trust, loyalty, and the importance of careful decision-making. Their words were measured, but he felt their weight. They were not judging him, he realized. But they were aware. In their eyes, every action had meaning, every hesitation was noticed, and every choice could affect the delicate balance of relationships. He knew he could not delay the decision forever. The community's eyes, the mother's trust, and the young girl's well-being all rested in part on how he would respond. But even as the weight of expectation pressed down on him, he felt an unexpected sense of clarity beginning to emerge. It was not the clarity of certainty, but of understanding. That any choice had to be made with thought, respect, and integrity. He spent nights walking beneath the stars, reflecting on what he had learned. The desert stretched endlessly, a silent witness to his thoughts. He thought about his own family, the values they had taught him, and the moments in his life when he had faced difficult decisions. He realized that responsibility was not about convenience or comfort. It was about courage, honesty, and care. Finally, he decided he could not make a decision alone. He needed to understand the perspectives of both the mother and the daughter directly. It was not enough to rely on advice, observation, or his own moral compass. To act responsibly, he had to listen, to speak openly, to hear their fears and hopes, and to find a path that honored their humanity. The next morning, he approached the mother's house with a sense of quiet determination. The daughter was outside, helping gather water from a small well. Their eyes met briefly, and he felt a mixture of warmth and tension. The mother welcomed him in with her usual calm grace, and they sat together in the small living room, the air filled with the scent of herbs and sunlight filtering through the windows. He spoke first, carefully choosing his words. He explained his confusion, his fear of offending, and his concern for the daughter's well-being. He expressed his respect for their culture, his understanding of responsibility, and his desire to act with integrity. The mother listened, her face calm but her eyes alert. She did not interrupt, allowing him to speak fully, letting him reveal the weight on his mind and heart. When he finished, there was a long silence. The only sound was the quiet breathing of the children outside and the soft wind moving through the trees. Then the mother spoke, her voice steady and measured.
She explained her perspective. The offer was not a demand, nor was it a test.
Narration. It was a reflection of trust, a recognition of his character, and an invitation to understand the complexities of their lives.
Narration.
He spoke of love, protection, and the hope she held for her daughter, emphasizing that any action he took would be judged not by tradition alone, but by the care and respect he demonstrated. The man listened, absorbing every word.
He realized that the situation was not as simple as refusal or acceptance. It was a matter of understanding, empathy, and careful navigation. Narration. He could not act impulsively, but he could act responsibly. And in that moment, a sense of resolve began to form. Bear. He would not make a hasty decision. He would continue to learn, to observe, and to build trust, ensuring that whatever choice he made would honor the dignity of both the mother and the daughter. By the end of the afternoon, he stepped outside into the warm light, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and clarity. He understood that the days ahead would be challenging, filled with careful observation, reflection, and thoughtful action. Narration. Yet there was a strange peace in knowing that he was beginning to navigate the situation with honesty and care. He had seen the complexity of human relationships, the weight of trust, and the importance of patience.
As night fell, he looked up at the stars again, feeling the same quiet awe he had experienced before. But now there was a new understanding.
He knew that he had taken the first steps toward acting with integrity, and that every interaction, every choice would matter. The path ahead was still uncertain, but he felt prepared, strengthened by the lessons he had learned and the trust he had been shown. Narration. And so, the man began the next stage of his journey, aware that the decision he would eventually make was not just about him, but about the lives of others. He understood that true responsibility required courage, empathy, and respect, and that sometimes the hardest path was also the most important. The days that followed were unlike any the man had ever experienced. Each morning, he woke with the sun, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on him like never before. The desert was still calm, the hills still stretched endlessly into the horizon, but he could no longer walk among them without thinking of the mother, her daughter, and the choice he had yet to make. It was not a matter of desire or convenience. He knew that now. It was a matter of understanding, of care, and of respect for human lives and human dignity. He spent his mornings helping with chores, repairing fences, and tending to small tasks in the community. Every interaction, even the simplest, seemed charged with significance. When the daughter ran past him, carrying water or helping with the garden, he caught himself watching her closely, not with expectation, but with concern. She was bright and curious, and he wanted to understand her world before making any decision that could affect it. Every glance he exchanged with her reminded him of the delicate balance he had to maintain: kindness without overstepping, involvement without imposing, involvement without imposing. The mother, too, seemed to sense his struggle. She did not push him or demand answers, but there were moments when her eyes lingered on him a little longer than necessary, as if inviting him to see beyond the surface of the offer she had made. She spoke often about responsibility, about protecting those who could not fully protect themselves, and about the importance of understanding before action. In her words, he found both wisdom and challenge, a reminder that his choices carried weight far beyond his own life. One afternoon, he found himself alone with the daughter, near a small stream. She was trying to gather water in a tiny bucket, her small hands struggling with the weight. He stepped closer, offering his assistance. "May I help you?" he asked gently. She looked at him with quiet curiosity and nodded. Together they filled the bucket, working side by side in silence. During the moments of quiet, he observed her closely. There was a calm intelligence in her movements, a careful attention to what she was doing, and a subtle awareness of the world around her. She was not a symbol or an obligation. She was a person, with thoughts, feelings, and a developing sense of right and wrong. He realized that whatever choice he made in the future, it had to honor her humanity first and foremost. Later that day, he spoke again with the mother. He explained that he wanted to understand her daughter's life, her hopes, and her experiences before considering any decision. The mother listened carefully, her face calm, but he could sense her approval in the slight nod she gave. She understood his hesitation, and she respected the care he was taking to act responsibly. In that conversation, the man felt a shift. The offer, once shocking and almost unbearable, became a doorway to deeper understanding. A chance to see life from a perspective he had never encountered.
The following week was a test of patience and observation.
He spent hours simply watching, learning the routines of the household, the interactions between mother and daughter, and the ways the community supported one another. He saw how decisions were made, how responsibilities were shared, and how trust was earned. Every day he reflected on his own values, his upbringing, and the principles that had guided him until now. He realized that the situation was not about refusing or accepting in a simple sense. It was about acting with wisdom, empathy, and respect. One evening, while the family was preparing dinner, the man noticed the daughter struggling to reach a high shelf. Without thinking, he stepped forward and offered to help her. She hesitated for a moment, then accepted, her small hand brushing against his as she steadied herself. The gesture was innocent, simple, and human, but it carried a weight he had not anticipated. He felt the trust implicit in her action, and he realized that trust was the most fragile and precious element in all of this. As the week progressed, he began to speak more with the daughter, asking about her interests, her favorite activities, and her dreams. She was quiet at first, unsure how much to share, but gradually she opened up. She spoke of her love for reading, her curiosity about the world, and her desire to learn as much as she could. He listened attentively, feeling a growing sense of responsibility not just for the decision he had to make, but for the guidance and protection of a young life he had come to respect deeply.
The mother watched these interactions with careful eyes.
She did not intervene, but she observed, noting the man's respect, patience, and genuine concern. There was no pressure in her gaze, only awareness. She understood that he was navigating a difficult moral path, and she allowed him the space to act with integrity. In these moments, he began to understand that the offer she had made was not a demand, but a test of character. A way to see how he would respond to trust, responsibility, and human connection.
One afternoon, a conversation arose that changed the man's perspective even further.
The mother spoke about the importance of understanding culture, tradition, and history. She explained that the offer had roots and practices meant to strengthen family bonds and community connections, but that it was always contingent on care, respect, and moral integrity.
The man listened, absorbing every word.
He realized that the situation was far more complex than he had first imagined. It was not simply about an offer or a refusal. It was about navigating life with empathy, awareness, and responsibility. He began to reflect deeply on his own life. He thought about the choices he had made, the values he had held, and the moments when he had faced moral dilemmas. He saw that the situation before him was similar, but far more immediate in its impact on others. It was not about theory or principle. It was about real people, real trust, and real consequences. Every step he took, every word he spoke, had the potential to affect lives in ways he could not yet fully understand. By the end of the week, he knew he could no longer avoid direct engagement. He had learned, observed, and reflected, and he was ready to speak openly with both the mother and the daughter. He wanted to express his respect, his concerns, and his understanding of the gravity of the situation. It was time to confront the complexity, to listen fully, and to act with care.
He invited the mother to speak with him privately one evening, after the children had gone to bed.
They sat together in the quiet of the small living room, the air filled with the scent of herbs and the soft light of a single lamp. He explained his reflections, his understanding of her perspective, and his desire to act with integrity. He asked questions seeking clarity about her intentions, the daughter's well-being, and the cultural expectations that had shaped the offer. The mother listened patiently, her eyes steady and calm. Brr. She explained that her offer had never been about obligation or power, but about trust and character. She wanted to see whether he could act with care, respect, and moral clarity. Brr.
She emphasized that the daughter's well-being was the priority, and that any decision he made had to honor her dignity and her rights.
The conversation was long and thoughtful, filled with pauses, reflections, and careful consideration. The man realized that he had been approaching the situation too simplistically. It was not about acceptance or refusal alone. It was about understanding, empathy, and responsible action.
He began to see a path forward, one that allowed him to maintain his moral integrity while respecting the family's values and protecting the daughter's well-being.
In the days that followed, he took deliberate actions to demonstrate his respect and care. He helped with chores, offered guidance to the daughter when appropriate, and continued to engage with the mother in thoughtful, reflective conversations. He did not overstep boundaries, but he made it clear through his actions that he valued trust, honesty, and responsibility above all else.
The daughter, too, began to respond.
She grew more comfortable in his presence, more willing to share her thoughts, and more confident in seeking guidance. Their interactions remained respectful and appropriate, but there was a quiet bond forming, based on trust and mutual understanding. The man realized that this bond was the foundation for any future decisions he might make. It was built not on obligation or expectation, but on respect, care, and moral integrity.
By the end of this period, the man felt a sense of cautious optimism. He knew that the situation was far from resolved, but he also understood that he had taken the first crucial steps toward acting responsibly.
He had listened, observed, reflected, and engaged with care. He had learned the importance of trust, empathy, and moral clarity. And he had begun to see a path forward, one that would honor both his values and the well-being of those he had come to respect deeply.
As night fell over the desert, he stood outside looking at the stars.
The quiet beauty of the landscape mirrored the calm he felt inside, despite the complexity of the situation. He knew that challenges remained, but he was no longer paralyzed by fear or confusion. He had begun to navigate the difficult path with honesty, patience, and respect. And in that moment, he realized that true responsibility was not about avoiding difficult choices. It was about facing them with integrity and care. The man woke before sunrise, the desert air cool against his skin. The night had been restless, filled with thoughts of the family, the daughter, and the choices that still lay ahead. He knew that the time for reflection was ending. It was now a matter of action. He dressed quietly, careful not to disturb the few other early risers in the community, and stepped outside. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the hills with soft golden light. As he walked toward the mother's hall, he felt a mixture of calm and tension. The days of observation, reflection, and quiet interaction had prepared him, but the responsibility he felt pressed down like a heavy weight. He reminded himself that his goal was not to meet expectations or to fulfill obligations, but to act with care, respect, inspiration. He wanted any decision to honor the lives and dignity of both the mother and her daughter. When he arrived, the mother greeted him with a gentle nod by helping arrange a small basket of fruits and vegetables. Their eyes met, and he could see curiosity and trust in her gaze. It was a quiet moment, but one filled with significance. He understood that the next conversation would shape the future of their relationship and possibly influence the daughter's life in profound ways. He began speaking carefully, choosing each word with thought. I have spent many days reflecting, he said softly. I have watched, I have listened, and I have tried to understand. Narration. I know now that this situation is not simple. It is about trust, responsibility, and respect. Narration.
And above all, it is about your daughter's well-being.
The mother listened, her face calm, her hands folded in her lap. She did not interrupt, allowing him to continue. I want you to know that I respect you and your family deeply, he said. Your trust is not something I take lightly. I also understand that your offer was not meant as a demand but as a test of character, a way to see how I would respond to responsibility and care.
The mother's eyes softened slightly. She nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that he understood her perspective.
She knew that he had spent time learning, reflecting, and observing. His words demonstrated the respect and integrity she had hoped to see.
He took a deep breath, glancing at the daughter.
And to your daughter,
He continued, his voice gentle. I want you to know that I see you as a person first.
You are not an obligation or a responsibility to be taken lightly. Your thoughts, feelings, and choices matter more than anything else.
I want to protect your well-being, to ensure that you grow up with trust, respect, and care. The daughter looked at him, her eyes wide but calm. For the first time, he felt a sense of mutual understanding forming. She did not speak, but her quiet presence communicated a trust he had earned through days of careful attention, patience, and honesty. The mother spoke then, her voice steady and clear. I have seen how you have treated us, she said. I have seen your respect, your patience, and your care. That is all I could hope for. Whatever choice you make now, it must continue to honor that integrity, and it must ensure the safety and dignity of my daughter. The man nodded. He realized that the moment of decision was not about fulfilling expectations or satisfying traditions. It was about building a path forward that respected everyone's humanity. He thought of the days he had spent observing, learning, and reflecting. He remembered the laughter of the daughter, the wisdom of the mother, and the quiet strength of the community. He understood that the right path was one that prioritized care, respect, and trust above all else. I cannot accept your offer in the way it was made, he said finally. It would not be right for me, and it would not honor your daughter's independence and dignity. But I can promise this. I will continue to support, guide, and protect her in any way I can. I will act with honesty, integrity, and care, ensuring that her well-being is always the first priority. And I will respect your family, your culture, and your traditions in every action I take. The mother smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and quiet approval. She had not expected a simple answer, and she had not wanted one. What mattered was that he had acted thoughtfully, with awareness of the complexity of the situation and respect for all involved. The daughter, too, seemed to understand. She nodded slightly, a small gesture that spoke volumes. She had felt the care, respect, and trust he had shown over the past days, and she recognized that he was acting in a way that honored her life and choices. In the days that followed, the dynamic between them shifted. The man continued to help with chores, guide the daughter when appropriate, and engage with the mother in thoughtful conversation. Their interactions were no longer shadowed by tension or uncertainty. Instead, there was a quiet harmony, built on mutual respect, understanding, and careful communication. He also spent time learning more about the community, attending small gatherings, listening to elders, and participating in traditions with care. He began to understand the deeper meaning of trust, responsibility, and honor in a context that was not his own. He realized that respect for culture was not about blind obedience or adherence to expectations, but about empathy, understanding, and mindful action. One afternoon, he found the daughter sitting alone by the stream, sketching in a small notebook. He approached quietly, observing the drawings. Careful lines, attention to detail, and a thoughtful imagination. She looked up and smiled faintly, welcoming his presence without words. He sat beside her, offering quiet companionship. They spoke of simple things, the beauty of the desert, the stories she imagined, and the lessons she had learned from her mother. Through these moments, he understood something profound. True guidance and care were not about control or expectation. They were about support, encouragement, and protection, given with respect for the other person's choices. He had seen this in the mother's actions, and now saw it reflected in his own interactions with the daughter. Weeks turned into months, and the man became a familiar, trusted presence in the household. The offer that had once seemed shocking was no longer a source of tension. It had transformed into an opportunity for understanding, growth, and meaningful connection. The mother and daughter trusted him not because of obligation, but because he had earned it through careful, respectful, and consistent action. He also reflected on himself. He realized that this experience had changed him profoundly. He had faced moral uncertainty, cultural differences, and the weight of responsibility in ways he had never imagined. He had learned patience, empathy, and the importance of integrity, and he had come to understand that real-life challenges are not about simple choices. They are about navigating complexity with awareness, care, and respect. The mother, too, noticed the growth. She saw that he had acted with honesty and moral clarity, and she knew that her daughter was safe, supported, and respected. She felt relief and gratitude, knowing that the trust she had placed in him was well earned. The relationship that had begun with uncertainty and tension had evolved into one of mutual respect and understanding. The daughter, now more confident and at ease, continued to grow in knowledge, curiosity, and independence. She sought guidance when needed, but she was also free to explore, learn, and develop her own sense of self. The man had fulfilled his promise, not through acceptance of a shocking offer, but through consistent care, respect, and moral integrity. By the end of the year, the man reflected on the journey he had taken. The experience had tested him, challenged him, and ultimately transformed him. He had learned that true responsibility is not about fulfilling expectations, but about acting with empathy, understanding, and honesty. He had learned that cultural differences require careful observation, thoughtful reflection, and respectful engagement. And he had learned that human trust is fragile but powerful, capable of shaping lives in ways that endure far beyond a single moment or decision. As he prepared to leave the community, he felt a sense of quiet fulfillment. He had navigated a situation that once seemed impossible, and he had done so with integrity, care, and respect. The mother and daughter had grown to trust him, not because of obligation, but because he had earned it through thoughtfulness and moral clarity. On his final day, he stood outside the home, watching the daughter run and play in the garden, the mother smiling nearby.
The sun was setting, casting long shadows and a warm glow over the landscape. He felt a deep sense of connection, not just to the family, but to the community, the culture, and the lessons he had learned.
He knew that the experience would stay with him forever. The offer that had once seemed shocking had become a profound lesson in empathy, responsibility, and human dignity. He had faced uncertainty, reflected deeply, and acted with care, and in doing so, he had grown in ways he could never have imagined. As he walked away from the home, the desert wind brushing against his face, he felt a quiet peace. He had learned that life's most difficult decisions are not about power or obligation, but about respect, understanding, and the courage to act with integrity. And he knew that wherever he went, the lessons of that desert, that family, and that experience would guide him for the rest of his life.